Why did I realize something was off but not try harder to get her to talk about her troubles on the phone? Why did I just think she would talk about it eventually? Maybe if I had listened, this wouldn't have happened.
Stop it, it's not your fault. I'm to blame too. Maybe I pressured her too much with work. Even if not, I was there and should have noticed and supported her.
My best friend had taken her own life. I was nearly crushed by regret. At the funeral, my husband felt the same. Whenever we spoke, we only blamed ourselves. After the funeral, I went to my best friend's parents to apologize for not doing anything when I noticed he was off during our phone call. My husband also apologized to them for not being able to deal with her, even though he was always nearby during work. My best friend's parents told us it wasn't our fault and asked us not to blame ourselves. Even hearing that, my husband couldn't raise his head for 5 minutes. As the funeral ended and my husband and I were about to leave, my father stopped me.
There's mail at home for you. It might be something important, so don't forget to take it with you.
Why did my best friend send it to my parents' house instead of mine? Feeling uneasy, I decided to stop by my parents' house alone on the way home. What arrived was an envelope, slightly bulging, indicating several pages of a letter inside. With trembling hands, I cut open the envelope to reveal its contents. The letter was folded in 3, comprising about 4 pages. Opening it, the first page simply read, "Please read this without your husband finding out," in large letters. Puzzled, I moved on to the second page. At the top of the second page, in large letters, was what seemed to be the title of the letter. Just by reading that title, I could guess what the rest of the letter contained. If I was right, it would contain something dreadful. My hands shook, but I gathered my courage to continue reading. What followed was an astonishing truth. I am Emily, a 27-year-old office worker. I'm currently on maternity leave just after giving birth. My husband, David, is 6 years older and owns 3 restaurants. He was initially also an office worker like me, but he suddenly decided to quit his job during a relationship.
I've always wanted to own a restaurant. I thought if I get older or married, I wouldn't be able to take such risks. It's easier to bounce back if I fail while I'm young. So, can I quit my job?
At that time, David was 29, wanting to act before turning 30. I was only 23, more inclined to support and encourage my dreamer husband than to hold realistic views. Many people in their 30s and 40s just drag along in their jobs, right? It's better to go all out on what you want to do now. Just make sure if it doesn't work out, you find a new job and don't mope around, okay?
Don't talk like I'm bound to fail.
Encouraged by me, David quit his job and gained experience in a friend's restaurant while preparing to open his own. His concentration and action towards the goal were impressive, and in just 2 years, he was nearly ready to open his restaurant. However, there was one persisting issue. Can't you find anyone yet?
Yeah, it's hard to find experienced people willing to work for a not yet existent restaurant.
Isn't it okay to wait until the restaurant opens? Is it a bad time to post for staff?
That would be too late. If we can't find anyone by the opening, the restaurant might not operate smoothly.
David had been advised by his mentor in the restaurant business that securing an experienced right-hand person before starting was crucial. The restaurant owner also has to do some work outside the restaurant. Also, there are critical tasks in the restaurant that you can't just leave to part-timers. It would be too much for my husband, David, to handle all by himself. So, it seems wise to secure at least one person he can confidently leave in charge. However, finding someone experienced enough to run the place is no easy feat. David was racking his brain over this every day. One day, I stumbled upon a post from an old friend, Lisa, on social media. My old friend Lisa worked at a restaurant for almost 10 years, So I tried sending her a message. To my surprise, the response was positive, and it led to an introduction to David.
Are you really willing to join us?
Yes, I can help with setting up and eventually take charge of some aspects, right?
Actually, I'll be relying on you since you have way more experience than I do.
I've always wanted to own a restaurant too, so getting involved in building and managing a restaurant will be great experience for me.
Even with 10 years in the industry, you can't go so low?
It's more about the money than experience. The pay in this industry isn't great, so saving up to start a business is tough. Besides, setting up a restaurant costs a fortune, and with my track record, just as an employee. So not having enough savings means you can't borrow what you need. It's ironic. People like David who've worked corporate jobs have more credit and capital, so they often start businesses before those who've been in the industry longer.
The restaurant business is tough, huh?
Exactly. That's why getting involved from the ground up is a valuable experience for me.
My experience in the industry is limited, so having Lisa around is a huge help. Looking forward to working with you.
This solved the staffing issue. With the problem resolved, David's restaurant setup progressed rapidly, and soon it was up and running. Lisa's experience compensated for David's lack of it, helping the business grow steadily. But David seemed troubled. Hey, Lisa, the restaurant is thriving, but David looks down. He won't talk about it. Is there an issue at the restaurant?
An issue? I don't think so. But maybe he's just exhausted from the workload and pressure. He's been nonstop since we opened, right? Also, he took out a loan of about $100,000 to start the business, right? There's the repayment. And even though things are going well now, the fear of sales dropping is real. Wouldn't it be weirder if he seemed totally fine?
I see. It's his first time as an entrepreneur, so maybe he's feeling the grind.
Exactly. That's why, Emily, you need to support David's mental.
I understood Lisa's point. As a new entrepreneur, David faces pressures I can't comprehend as a corporate employee. I can't assist him in his work like Lisa can. So, I make sure he can relax at home, ensuring he has nothing to do and can immediately take a shower after work. That's about all I can do, but it seems my small acts of kindness have reached him, and he gradually recovered his energy. As David felt better, the restaurant prospered even more. Good things continued, and 3 years after starting the restaurant, we got married, and 3 years later, we had our daughter, Amy. Everything seemed smooth. But that was only on the surface. Behind the scenes, things were not going well. My daughter brought me happy days, but David is starting to lose his energy again. He didn't talk to me the last time he felt down, and I doubt he will this time, but I asked him about his recent mood anyway. Recently, you seem down. Is there a problem at the restaurant? Surprisingly, David shared the reason for his gloom.
Actually, a new restaurant opened up nearby. It's fancier and more stylish than ours. It's like an upgraded version of our place.
So, they're taking your customers?
Yo, they've been open for 3 months, and their momentum hasn't slowed at all. They're attracting even more customers. If our sales keep dropping, we might not sustain the business, and I've only paid off about half of my loan.
I regretted asking about his troubles. I wanted to know, but there's nothing I can do to win back the customers lost to the competitor. All I can do is nod and be a sounding board for David's complaints and worries. I understand that I can't help with his job. Even so, wondering if there was anything I could do, I reached out to Lisa. Again? Things haven't been great at the restaurant lately, have they? David told me. Is there anything I can do?
Probably not much. Maybe save on the cost of one part-timer by helping out at the restaurant.
I can't help at the restaurant because of Amy.
Right? That's why I said there isn't much. David is bustling to get the restaurant back on track, so he'll probably be fine. Please keep supporting his mind like you've been doing.
Got it. Then I'll leave the business support to you, Lisa. Take care of David, please.
Sure, I got it. Leave it to me.
6 years since David started the restaurant. Lisa and I had gone from friends to best friends. I could consult her about anything regarding David, and she would advise me. I've sought her advice on issues with David, and her guidance has always been spot on. If she says David will turn the restaurant around, then I trust it will be okay. I decided to follow my best friend's advice and continue supporting David's mental. Months later, as Lisa predicted, David managed to revive the restaurant. It was more like fortune favored him, though. Did the restaurant that was stealing customers from David's place close down? It was doing well, wasn't it?
Our new menu was a hit. We managed to win back the customers. The other place got scared off by my skills and retreated early.
A single menu change doesn't just flip the situation, right? Maybe they moved because they were more successful than expected, to a location with better conditions and more space.
That's because they were intimidated by my skills. Watch, the other stores will start fleeing too.
Yeah, I get it. Looking forward to it. With the competition gone, David's restaurant sales rebounded. In fact, several other eateries around him closed down. With fewer restaurants nearby, his business saw even greater growth. In these times, it's not unusual for restaurants to close. However, David took this coincidence as validation, boasting, "See, just as I said. This area is practically my territory now, the David Empire. No one can compete with me." He was getting carried away. When people get too cocky, it often leads to failure, and I was worried he might face a harsh reality soon. But his restaurant continued to thrive. Riding high on success, David was completely swept up in enthusiasm.
It's going so well. I'm thinking of opening a second location. I plan to leave Lisa in charge there mostly.
Have you discussed this with Lisa?
We talked, and she's on board.
I was worried because Lisa has mentioned wanting her own place someday, so I thought she might leave.
I plan to have Lisa help us for the long haul. I won't let her go.
Hearing about the second location, I was amazed at how carried away David was getting, but knowing that Lisa would be in charge blew away my exasperation, and I wholeheartedly supported the idea. The second location was completed quickly. With experience in creating a successful business, Lisa quickly made the second location a popular spot. With the second restaurant thriving, David's confidence soared even further, bordering on recklessness.
Now that I've established the David Empire around the second location, I'm thinking of changing things up and opening a bar. Not just any bar, but one with an upscale vibe, exclusive, by reservation or referral only.
Isn't that a bit too cocky? Just deciding to open a bar like that, as if it's so easy?
Don't worry. Everything I do turns out great.
David laughed with full confidence. If I weren't his family, such arrogance might have been unbearable. But I knew of all the struggles he had overcome since opening the first restaurant. Having overcome those challenges, I felt he deserved to ride this wave of success. I decided not to interfere with the bar's opening. The bar, being smaller in scale, was completed even more effortlessly than the second restaurant. I've never been to a high-end bar before, so I asked my husband to show me the new place. "Isn't the bar ready? Show it to me before it opens."
What? The bar? Oh, no, I can't do that. I can't even tell you where it is.
Why not? You showed me the first and second locations before they opened.
Didn't I mention the bar's concept is an upscale hideaway? I want it to be exclusive, accessible only to people I know, like company CEOs or at least directors.
Are you saying I can't enter because I'm poor?
It's not like that. I don't think you'd leak the location, but you never know how information might slip out. I just don't want to take any small risk that could compromise the concept.
Fine, but at least show me some pictures of the interior.
Okay, I'll take some pictures next time.
While I wanted to see the bar, I understood that accidentally leaking any information could ruin the concept, and I wouldn't want to bear that responsibility. Reluctantly, I backed off, but it still bothered me. When feeling like this, venting to a close friend is the best remedy. Lisa, you know where the new bar is, right?
Yo. Well, I need to know for work, in case of emergencies.
It bothers me that I'm the only one out of the loop. Come on, just tell me secretly.
No way. Absolutely not. Emily, you don't need to know.
All right. No need to get mad. While talking on the phone, I sensed a different vibe from Lisa than usual. However, if she had any issues, she would bring them up herself. Since she didn't, I assumed it wasn't the time yet. Lisa has always listened to my worries and complaints about David. If she has any problems, I will listen to her fully. But that conversation ended up being our last. Days later, Lisa took her own life at home. A family photo was found in her pocket, and another lay on the floor. The picture on the floor was crumpled, so she probably clutched it until the last second. At Lisa's funeral, I was overwhelmed with regret. Why did I realize something was off but not try harder to get her to talk about her troubles on the phone? Why did I just think she would talk about it eventually? Maybe if I had listened, this wouldn't have happened.
Stop it, it's not your fault. I'm to blame too. Maybe I pressured her too much with work. Even if not, I was there and should have noticed and supported her.
Whenever we spoke, we only blamed ourselves. After the funeral, I apologized to Lisa's parents for not noticing her distress during our call. David also apologized to them for not being able to deal with her, even though he was always nearby during work.
Lisa always said she wanted her own place. So when David put her in charge of the second location, she was thrilled, almost fulfilling her dream. Please don't apologize. Her decision wasn't because of work.
Don't blame yourself, Emily. We, her parents, should have noticed any changes first. You used to play with Lisa a lot in elementary school, right? She would be happy you came today.
David couldn't lift his head, even when Lisa's parents urged him to, staying bowed for about 5 minutes. Though told not to blame myself, it's hard not to feel responsible, especially since I spoke to Lisa just days before her death. After the funeral, as my husband and I were about to leave, my father called out to me. It wasn't unusual for him to attend the funeral since Lisa and I were childhood friends and our homes were close. But it was strange to see him with a troubled expression, not one of sadness or loneliness. I had David go back to the car first, and I listened to my father.
Emily, there's a letter for you from Lisa at the house. It might be something important, so don't forget to take it with you.
It wasn't strange for Lisa to send mail to my parents' house since she knew their address. But she also knew mine. Why would she send it to my parents' house instead of mine? If she had something to say, a call would suffice, or she could have given it to David. Feeling uneasy, I decided to visit my parents' house alone. Sorry, I'm going to my parents' place alone. You go ahead. Dad will give me a ride back.
What? Weren't you planning to stop by your mother's to pick up Amy?
Well, you know, Lisa was my childhood friend, right? Thinking about all the memories, I just didn't want to leave this place. And, oh yeah, my parents and I, we all knew Lisa well since she was little, right? So, I wanted to reminisce about the old times with them.
I see. Maybe you should stay the night then.
Yeah, I think I will. I waved goodbye to David's car and then got into my father's car to head to my parents' house. Arriving home, my mother handed me the letter that Lisa had sent. I didn't know what it contained. I went to my old room in my parents' house to check the contents alone. What arrived was an envelope, slightly bulging, indicating several pages of a letter inside. With trembling hands, I cut the edge of the envelope with scissors. Upon cutting it open, photos and a USB drive fell out. But I decided to read Lisa's letter first. The letter was folded in three, containing about 4 pages. The first page had "Please read this without your husband finding out" written in large letters. Puzzled, I moved on to the second page. At the top of the second page, in large letters, was what seemed to be the title of the letter. Just by reading that title, I could guess what the rest of the letter contained. It must contain something dreadful. My hands began to shake, but I mustered the courage to continue reading. The letter contained an astonishing truth. After reading it and knowing the truth, I considered pretending ignorance and fleeing from my husband. But if David realized that I knew the truth, it could put both me and my daughter in danger. Also, if I were to divorce, I might lose custody of my daughter. Knowing the risks, I resolved to confront David. I spent the night at my parents' house and returned home the next day. When I arrived around noon, David was preparing to leave.
Ah, you're back.
Where are you going?
I'm heading to Lisa's place. There are some documents there needed for the restaurant. I've got her parents' permission to pick them up.
To Lisa's house. Take me with you.
No, I already told her parents I'd be going alone, and there are some documents that shouldn't be seen by anyone outside the restaurant staff. I'll go by myself.
Knowing the truth, I could tell my husband was lying. I had been deceived by David, but knowing the facts beforehand, I could easily see the other side of his mind. As he insisted on going alone, I saw him off at the entrance. It seemed I had to act quickly. Once he was out of sight, I too left the house. I arrived at Lisa's apartment building. Standing at the entrance, I heard noises inside, like someone rummaging through things. The door was unlocked, so I quietly entered. In the living room, David, unaware of my presence, was frantically flipping through files he had pulled from a shelf. You didn't find what you were looking for, did you?
Whoa, you scared me.
Startled by my voice, he dropped the files, scattering the restaurant's documents all over the floor.
Damn, it's you. I told you not to come.
While gathering the documents, he complained, but then he paused, remembering my words.
Did you say I wouldn't find what I was looking for?
I felt like I was seeing a different person in my husband. His suspicion towards me clearly heightened. But his heightened suspicion didn't matter. I was there to tell David the truth. So I spoke openly and honestly. Lisa sent a letter to my parents' house. It had everything about what you've been doing these past 6 years since you started the restaurant.
What? A letter? It mentioned me. What did it say?
He seemed to be probing how much the letter revealed. Unfortunately for him, it revealed everything. Lisa had told me all. You've become like a collaborator with the gangbanger, haven't you?
So, you know everything, huh?
Yes, starting from when those gangbanger guys came demanding protection money when you first opened the shop.
Damn it, so you know it all.
But you stood your ground and refused to pay at that time, right? Nowadays, the gangbanger can't be as brazen as before due to stricter law enforcement.
That's right. But that was the beginning of our involvement.
You first turned to the gangbanger when a competing store opened near ours, right?
Yo, they came by again around that time. After being refused by the other store, they just happened to stop by ours too.
And that's when they offered to take down the rival store in exchange for money. His face turned regretful as he recalled those moments. David was frantic, fearing that the restaurant might not survive if things continued as they were. Fearful of losing the restaurant he built with a loan of $100,000. I could somewhat understand his desperation. Lisa must have felt the same. Both lost their cool and succumbed to the gangbangas' whispers. The gangbanga today can't just storm into places and wreak havoc, but they exerted pressure from behind the scenes and even sent thugs to truly take down the competition. They thought of it as a one-time deal, but once you engage with the gangbanga, cutting ties becomes difficult. The relationship continued, and David began giving a part of the restaurant's earnings to the gangbanga. You became defiant, paying the gangbanga to take care of various things, didn't you?
Sure, I had them pressure the surrounding stores to get rid of them.
So, you got rid of anyone who could stand against you in the area, creating David Empire, and got carried away, leading to the bar, right?
You know a lot. That bar was for overcharging, hosting important gangbanga guests, and strategizing their next moves.
That's why it was such a secluded hideaway bar. Around the time the bar was established, Lisa was under a lot of pressure, wasn't she? Not just with the restaurant, but also being forced into criminal activities.
We were in business together, so naturally, I had her help out.
But Lisa wanted out, right? She was suffering, being forced into crimes, and earning resentment from others.
She was paid well for her help. No reason for complaints, and I couldn't just let her leave, knowing what we were up to.
And you threatened her with harming her parents, or even me, to keep her in line. Talking to David made me feel nauseous. Though cornered, Lisa was at fault for turning to the gangbanga. But David, who got a taste for it and became reckless, was worse. It seems Lisa was coerced by David and the gangbanga into silence, leading to her tragic decision.
Now that you know everything, I can't let you go. You'll replace Lisa. Don't even think about talking to the police. You know what would happen if you did, right?
I thought maybe you were also trapped in your dealings with the gangbanga and struggling to break free. But unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case.
Huh? Money's rolling in. Why would I want to cut ties?
Hearing David's remarks, I sighed deeply. As if on cue, 2 police officers entered the room.
This is enough. It's dangerous, so please step back.
Yes,
What's this? You already called them.
yes. You came here to destroy evidence linking you and the gangbanga, right? Did you find any?
No, nothing came out. You came after me.
Lisa sent not just a letter but also evidence of your crimes with the gangbanga, like documents, photos, and a USB drive. Before coming here, I stopped by the police station. You were already under surveillance by the police. So, after explaining the situation and showing the evidence, the police decided to come here immediately. There are only 2 inside, but there are more officers outside, so you can't escape now.
So, I'm already cornered, huh?
That's right. As I mentioned earlier, I thought maybe you were just struggling with breaking ties with the gangbanga. So I convinced the police to give me a chance to persuade you to surrender voluntarily. But we had an agreement that if things seemed dangerous at any point, they would intervene. They came in because you started threatening me.
Why would Lisa send the evidence to you? It would only put you in danger.
Lisa had already decided to end her life. If she took the evidence to the police herself, she might get detained and unable to complete her intention. Sending it by mail, she wasn't sure if it would be thoroughly checked, and there was a chance it could be dismissed as a prank if inspected. So, she wrote in the letter that she wanted me to deliver the evidence to the police directly. You really drove my best friend to her limits.
Can you come with us to the station to talk more about this?
David, who had perhaps believed he wouldn't get caught, now seemed to grasp the reality of his situation as he heard the police speak, his anxiety becoming evident.
No, I was just deceived by the gangbanga. I did things, but I didn't want to, you know. It's my first offense, so it shouldn't count as a crime, right? I'll just go to the station, they'll hear me out, maybe give me a warning, And I'll be home soon, right?
The two officers grabbed David's arms and led him outside. He either resisted faintly or couldn't accept the reality, walking a bit slower than the officers. As David was placed into the patrol car, it drove away without blaring the siren. Subsequently, he was arrested and charged with crimes like extortion and blackmail related to the restaurant. He was also involved in fraud and illegal transactions, facing charges for those as well. Ultimately, even as a first offender, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison due to the sheer selfishness and severity of his crimes. The gangbanger members connected to David were also arrested, though it seems only the lower ranks were caught, and the core group remained untouched. While laws against organized crime are advancing, these groups still find loopholes, continuing a cat-and-mouse game. Nonetheless, with David and his accomplices behind bars, I believe my daughter and I are safe. Even if David is released, he's not a gangbanger member himself, so he shouldn't be able to harm us. If any gangbanger did come after us, their grudge would likely be directed at David for his failures. A move might be all that's needed for precaution. Naturally, I will divorce him. Even my in-laws plan to cut ties with him. So upon release, he will be alone. Without the restaurant and branded as a criminal, he'll have no credibility, support, or resources. He might even be pursued by the gangbanger for revenge. His future seems bleak, and he should spend it reflecting on his actions. It's tragic that my best friend took her own life. She had her faults, but she suffered immensely and ultimately saved my daughter and me. I expressed my gratitude at her grave and informed her of my completed move. My daughter is only 1 year old now. She is my sole purpose in life. I am determined to ensure her happiness, leaving my friend's resting place with this resolve.
Hey, ugly. Your child is as defective as you.
As soon as we reunited for the first time in 13 years, my ex-husband stared us down from head to toe, my daughter and I, who was sitting in the wheelchair I was pushing, before hurling those words at us. I was instantly enraged and about to hurl a barrage of foul language.
What's wrong with my daughter?
The one who spoke up was my current husband, Richard. His deep baritone voice resonated well, not just catching my attention, but also turning the heads of those around us. However, I might have been the only one to notice the icy undertone in his voice. Looking back at my ex, Michael, his face had turned pale. My name is Susan. I'm 35 years old. I'm a stay-at-home mom living with my only daughter, Maria, who's 3, and my husband, Richard, who's 3 years younger than me. The house we currently live in was originally built by Richard's parents, but soon after Richard and I got married, his grandmother passed away suddenly. Not wanting to leave his grandfather, who was now living alone in old age, to fend for himself, his parents handed over the house they had been living in to us and moved in with his grandfather. But caring for his grandfather was just one reason. They were probably also worried about Richard, who had just started his own business and wanted to help by giving us a place to live without rent. That was a major factor. I was so grateful for my in-laws' kindness. Until Maria was born, I would visit his grandfather's house every other day to help out with things like hospital visits and housework. After Maria was born, I slowed down a bit, but still made it a point to visit with Richard at least once every 2 weeks. We would help out in any way we could at the time, and sometimes, to give his grandparents a break, we would take care of his grandfather so they could go out and relax at a day spa.
I'm truly grateful for all the help you give, especially during the tough times of parenting.
She's right. Richard really married a wonderful person.
They were always thankful, but to me, no amount of help seemed enough for what Richard's family, including his parents and his twin sister, Emily, had done for me. They had saved my life, not once, but twice. Actually, Richard was my first marriage, but I had been married once before and it had ended in failure. I met my first husband, Michael, right after I had moved to New York for university. We moved into the same apartment complex on the same day. As we settled in, we shared tips about the nearest supermarkets, home improvement stores, and affordable, tasty restaurants, and quickly became friends. Michael attended a prestigious private university known for its stylish campus and frequent media appearances, quite unlike my own, which prided itself on being practical and robust. Michael himself was also tall and slender, and what you would call handsome.
There are a lot of students from metropolitan areas at my university, and people from rural areas like me can hold their heads up. But you and I are in the same boat, Susan. It's more comfortable not having to put on airs.
He would hang out in my apartment so often that eventually, we began living together like a couple. Back then, I couldn't believe I was dating a guy as good-looking as Michael. I might not have the glamour of the female students on Michael's campus, but I can be a place where Michael feels at ease. I would think, naively happy to cook, clean, and do laundry like some kind of housemaid. Of course, no good man would make his partner feel comfortable right from the start of a relationship. That comfort was just shorthand for it's comfortable for the man, a complete self-centeredness. But as they say, love is blind. I completely ignored Michael's selfishness.
If only I could quit my job. The allowance from my parents isn't enough, and my classes are getting harder.
If he said such a thing, why not move to a slightly larger apartment? Don't worry about the rent. I offered that we move into a newly built apartment near the apartment where we met, and that I pay the full rent. Michael, of course, agreed with my proposal, but for some reason, he insisted on keeping both our phone lines separate. When I questioned it,
As soon as I entered high school, my dad got stationed in England, and my mom went with him. They're pretty strict. If it gets out that we're living together, not only will my allowance stop, but I might even be told to drop out of school. You wouldn't like that, would you, Susan? And even Susan's parents, as much as they might expect us to get married eventually, would be saddened to know we're cohabitating.
Michael said with unusual seriousness. At that moment, all I could focus on was the eventually get married part, and I didn't think too deeply about the rest. However, this full-time cohabitation began to weigh heavily on me financially. Since the apartment lease was under my name, I inevitably had to cover not only the rent but also the electricity, gas, water bills, and even the landline and internet fees. Of course, at first, he said, since you're covering the rent, I'll pay more for utilities, sounding quite noble.
Sorry, Susan. I'm broke again this month because of social obligations. I need to start considering job hunting soon. So when friends or classmates invite me out for drinks, I find it hard to say no.
I ended up covering everything. I was also paying for groceries. Even the beers Michael drank after his shower came out of my wallet. Michael only contributed to the occasional pizza delivery when his friends came over. And every time he invited friends from his seminar or club to our place, he'd say, if they find out we're living together, they'll tease us for sure. I haven't told them about you, making me leave the apartment for the day. But since I spent all my time outside of university classes working part-time and doing housework, I didn't have a single friend to chat with or hang out with. So I had to spend the night in cafes and chain restaurants. The summer was tough. But waiting on a park swing in the cold winter mornings until I could afford to go home brought me to tears, wondering what I was even doing with my life. By the time we were both in our 4th year of university and seriously job hunting, I finally snapped at Michael, contribute a bit to our living expenses. You're practically a freeloader now. He immediately switched to a soothing tone.
Sorry. I was just taking advantage of you. Don't be mad.
He blatantly tried to appease me. The next day, he unexpectedly came to pick me up from my part-time job and clean the apartment, preparing dinner with flowers, wine, and cake he seemed to have gotten from a high-class supermarket. Throughout our long relationship, it was as if, for the first time, I was truly moved by Michael's thoughtfulness, which culminated in him presenting me with a ring from a famous brand at the time.
I can only afford this right now, but someday I'll buy you a diamond worth 3 months of my salary.
I remember the moment he said that and slipped the ring on my finger, feeling the happiest I've ever felt in my life, echoing a line I must have heard somewhere. However, that memory of happiness was the only one of its kind.
I'm torn between getting a job and studying abroad. But if things stay as they are, I'll rely on Susan again. It's a crucial juncture, so I want to try being alone for a while.
He said so and suddenly left me to share an apartment with his friend. I felt anxious, but I managed to hold on since he had some belongings to leave behind, and we still communicated twice a day through emails and calls. I can't mope around. I've got to hustle and find a job too. With that change in spirit, I got an offer from my first choice mid-tier trading company. But around that time, strange calls started coming in on the landline registered under Michael's name. They automatically went to voicemail, and I would absent-mindedly listen to the messages being left, which included unsettling phrases like "it'll be trouble if you don't repay by this week," and "don't take us lightly." I hurriedly contacted Michael's cell phone, but all he said was, "It's nothing, don't worry about it." Eventually, letters with words like collection notice and final warning began to arrive in the mail. I finally confronted him about it.
Stop nagging me already. After all, I've done with an ugly defect like you. The least you can do is pay up.
And just like that, he got mad and stopped answering my calls. Deceived by his constant contact, I was shocked to realize that I hadn't asked Michael for his new address. When I tried asking the university, they told me they couldn't give out that information to someone unrelated, leaving me desperate for any clue. So I started opening the cardboard boxes Michael had left in his room. Inside, I found nothing but documents from various financial companies hinting at debts, old clothes that seemed worthless, and a used-up old laptop. There was nothing about Michael's parents' address in England or any clue about where he might be living now, making me realize I was just a source of money to him. But things got worse. Not long after losing contact with Michael, 2 men in suits showed up at my apartment, claiming I was Michael's wife and had co-signed his debts, demanding immediate repayment. The additional blow at a time when I hadn't even recovered from the shock of being abandoned by Michael was enough to crush me. What saved me was Richard and his family, who would become my husband. That's why I wanted to do anything I could for my in-laws and husband. However, while pushing my daughter Maria's wheelchair through the mall, I unexpectedly ran into someone. It was Michael, the man who had betrayed and abandoned me 13 years ago. Realizing I was staring in disbelief, he unabashedly ogled both my daughter in the wheelchair and me, then approached us with a distasteful smirk.
Hey, ugly. Your child is as defective as you.
He said, starting off with an insult. The thought that he would insult not only me but my innocent daughter made my blood boil. But then a man stepped suddenly in between us. That was my husband, Richard.
Is there a problem with my daughter?
Richard asked, his clear voice drawing the attention of passersby who stopped to see what was happening. Yet, Michael, faced with Richard's question, turned pale and didn't retort. Maria and I were wondering what was going on and looking back and forth between Michael's and Richard's faces. But Michael, unable to bear the stares of those around him, turned to Richard.
This is a private matter. It's none of your business, is it?
He snapped back. But Richard, without a flicker of emotion, responded.
It is my business. which is why I'm speaking up. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother talking to someone like you,"
he said with a snort of laughter.
"Mom and Dad have something to do. Your aunt will be here soon to pick you up, so could you go ahead to her house, Maria?"
Richard said, smiling at her. Hearing that, I couldn't help but exclaim, "What?" But Maria, mature for her age and not easily startled, remained calm.
"Okay, just make sure you come early. It's a celebration, after all."
Soon after, Richard's sister Emily and her kids arrived to pick up Maria, allowing her to leave the scene. Then, Richard's initial momentum was nowhere to be found. He turned to Michael, who was somewhat hesitant.
"Let's then move on to an adult conversation. It wouldn't be ideal to provide a free show for the public here, so let's move locations."
Slightly bending over and putting pressure on with a half smile. Michael, not particularly short but still overshadowed by Richard's nearly 6 feet 3 inch tall, agreed more readily than one might expect to change venues, perhaps preferring it to the curious stares of the onlookers. Unexpectedly, he readily agreed to Richard's suggestion and consented to change the location. The three of us took a taxi and arrived at the building where Richard's office was located. Upon pressing the elevator button and seeing the tenant directory next to it, Michael realized they were headed to a law firm, and his face turned pale once again. However, it was too late to run away, and he joined the others in the elevator. Since it was supposed to be Richard's day off, his staff were surprised to see him arrive looking stern with his wife and a guest. By the time they were shown to the back reception room, everyone seemed to have regained their composure. During this time, I managed to calm my own nerves just by looking at Richard's profile. In contrast, Michael was the only one who seemed restless and uneasy. Seeing Michael like this, Richard smirked and asked a staff member to bring over a stack of documents, placing them with a thud beside him.
"Well, it's quite the coincidence to meet the person in question before showing these investigation reports to the chairman. It's quite frightening, really,"
he casually remarked. Michael's complexion worsened at these words, but unfortunately, I had no idea what he was talking about. Noticing my confusion, Richard began to explain for the benefit of both Michael and myself. The chairman mentioned in the conversation earlier refers to the current chairman of a major machine tool manufacturer, a key client of Richard's office. Recently, the chairman personally summoned him. When Richard visited the head office, he was introduced to the chairman's youngest daughter, who had just returned from graduating from a university in the United States. They asked him to keep this confidential and requested that he conduct a background check on a certain man.
"And there you were in the sales department, Mr. Michael Smith. Well, at that time, you introduced yourself with a different spelling in your name as Michael, though," Richard continued, still with a smirk, while Michael's face grew even paler.
As Richard continued to smirk unabatedly, Michael's complexion seemed to worsen even further. Glancing sideways at him, Richard shared a story. The president's granddaughter in New York had pledged her future to an English man she met in graduate school at the same university. This man had dropped out of a university in England just before graduating and moved to the US, where he enrolled in a local university. After finishing his degree, he worked for a while as a local employee but soon got bored and pursued further studies in graduate school. The granddaughter, a smart woman, had fallen deeply in love with this man who had supported her through the culture shock and homesickness after enrolling in a university in New York. Having completed his master's program a bit earlier, they approached her grandfather, the president, asking for his blessing for their marriage and for him to hire the man in his company. It seems the chairman himself had no clue that a man like Michael was hanging around his granddaughter during her stay in New York. However, the chairman's daughter, The executive vice president had been introduced to the man a few times during their business trips to New York and had even met his parents, who were stationed there. The executive vice president herself thought at the time, "It's not my place to meddle in my adult daughter's love life," but felt it was too sudden when she was asked to marry him and to allow him to join their family-run company as a future executive candidate. So, after a discussion between the doting grandfather and the executive vice president, they decided to ask Richard's law firm, which had ties with their family for generations, to investigate Michael. Upon hearing this, I had a bad feeling. "You don't think that man is Michael, do you?" I asked Richard, looking directly at Michael sitting in front of me.
What's that supposed to mean? Is it bad if it's me? We've been broken up for ages. Who I marry is none of your business.
Michael snapped back even before Richard could respond. Sure, my past with Michael might as well be a dark history, and I've no interest or concern for Michael himself anymore, but I've got a mountain of grievances I'd love to air to him. We broke up, sure, but right before that, you went and filed for marriage without my consent, then made me a co-signer for your debts before skipping town. As I finished yelling, Michael looked momentarily subdued, but then he smirked.
You say that, but you wanted to marry me back then, didn't you? I just made your dream come true and asked for a little help paying off my debts in return.
He said, then nodded towards Richard.
I totally forgot about it because I went on an overseas trip. But when I got back here and checked, I was relieved to find I was single. I thought it was unlikely, but I didn't think anyone else would want someone as ugly and flawed as you. I was worried you'd be waiting for me to come back.
That's when he started talking down to me again. Furious at his condescending tone, I was about to snap again, but Richard, my husband, calmed me down once more.
Geez, I thought you might have learned something from being quiet earlier, but trash will always be trash.
With that, he smoothly began to explain how our marriage was dissolved and Michael was single again. Actually, when Michael disappeared and debt collectors came knocking, the first to offer me advice was Richard's father, my Phil. That's because I was tutoring as a part-time job, and my student at the time was Richard's twin sister, now my Sil, Emily. Emily was smart but was becoming increasingly absent from school due to being ostracized by her classmates. Hired by her worried parents, I learned the ostracism was due to her defending a friend who was also being excluded. I tried to cheer her up with studies and listening to her problems, and soon her parents and grandparents grew fond of me. They started treating me like a family member. Emily and her mother visited me to celebrate her university enrollment when the debt collectors arrived at my apartment. Shocked at my haggard appearance, she became furious upon learning I was tricked into marriage and made a co-signer for debts. Emily immediately contacted her father and grandfather, who brought me to this law firm.
From there, both my father and grandfather pulled out all the stops, running around to resolve the situation. First, they initiated mediation to invalidate the marriage that had been registered without my consent. At the same time, they negotiated with the financial institutions to invalidate my being made a co-signer for the debts. It must have been tough, but my father and grandfather are pretty savvy in this field, so in the end, everything worked out.
But I can only imagine the tremendous effort it took to invalidate the marriage through litigation against Michael, who was not even in the country and whose whereabouts were unknown, and dealing with the stubborn financial institutions was no easy feat. Meanwhile, overwhelmed by this unexpected disaster, dumped by Michael, and all the commotion causing me to graduate from university barely, I wondered how on earth I would afford the attorney's fees after losing the job offer I had secured. That's when my Phil offered me a job at this firm, saying it was okay to work here if I had nowhere else to go. Thinking of it as a way to repay them, I worked tirelessly from morning till night, even on weekends. I intended to pay the attorney's fees out of my installment salary. They received my payment only to the extent that they were not offended by the Bar Association. Thanks to their efforts, the marriage was ultimately annulled, and I was also released from being Michael's co-signer for his debts.
So, strictly speaking, you're not even Susan's ex-husband. Just a blot on her life.
Michael, upon hearing this, still seemed to not fully grasp the seriousness of the situation.
Well, having a marriage record with such a woman would be boring anyway. It doesn't matter. Besides, the debt's probably statute barred by now, so it's irrelevant.
He bluffed. But at that moment, Richard burst into laughter.
This statute of limitations hasn't taken effect. I expect the collectors will be visiting you first thing next week.
Facing Michael's bewildered look, Richard dropped this bombshell. Michael himself might have thought, it's already been 13 years, so it's probably statute barred. But thanks to my Phil, after getting me released as a co-signer and the financial institutions unable to find Michael, they came up with a plan. It seems they transferred Michael's debt as it was to a debt collection agency they were in cahoots with. In cases like Michael's, where the debtor attempts to evade repayment or falls behind, making it a bad debt, financial institutions sell these uncollectible debts to debt collection agencies. This process, known as debt assignment, means that from then on, the debt collection, now handled by professionals in collections, becomes the responsibility of these agencies. While they no longer resort to illegal means of collection like in the old days, due to their extensive legal knowledge, it seems they use every possible legal method to recover debts. Naturally, the debt collection agency that purchased Michael's debt was no exception. After proceeding with various legal actions, the judgment from the lawsuit the debt collection agency filed against Michael resulted in the statute of limitations being extended by another 10 years, making the debt fully valid even now. Moreover, the total amount of debt, inflated by accumulated late fees and legal costs, has reportedly skyrocketed to several times the original amount borrowed. Hearing this, Michael momentarily looked disheartened.
I don't care about such money. If I join that company as the CEO's son-in-law, it'll all be manageable.
He retorted, undeterred. Typical shallow Michael. Despite some miscalculations, he undoubtedly assumed that becoming a son-in-law as originally planned and securing a top position in his FIL's company would make repayments seem trivial.
Do you remember what I told you earlier? Who did I say had asked me to investigate you?
Richard said, causing Michael to turn pale this time. Richard is Emily's twin brother, but during my time as Emily's tutor, we hardly spoke, only exchanging greetings when we saw each other. However, Richard became interested in me after hearing his close sister Emily praise me and express her fondness as if I were her sister. Later, unexpectedly, I started working at the office, and Richard, who had passed the bar exam while still in university, taking the fastest route to become a lawyer, and I began working together at the office. When Richard offered me I wanted to date with marriage in mind, I explained my past and refused, saying it wouldn't be fair to my benefactor-in-laws. However, Richard said he knew all about my situation with Michael from the beginning and still wanted to marry me, and he convinced me that all in-laws support us being a couple. By then, my parents back in my small town, who knew about my situation and were concerned for my future, had also given us their blessing, and Richard and I were happily married. Unlike me, who had intended to seal away my past as a dark chapter, Richard had secretly harbored a desire for revenge against Michael for years. Then a request from the chairman arrived, and at first, I thought it was someone with the same name, but upon closer investigation, I discovered that the chairman's daughter's boyfriend, Michael Smith, was the same Michael Smith who had discarded me like trash. I was about to submit a report based on this discovery first thing next week.
I guess he thought he could hide it because the spelling is different. So when a chairman's granddaughter saw your driver's license and pointed out the difference in spelling, you made up some story about being told this version of the name is Lakir, right? But in reality, you were trying to cover up your many indiscretions. After all, Smith is the most common surname. You were planning to just claim it was a case of two people with the same name if anything bad happened, weren't you?
When he said that, he sharply retorted, "Don't think such shallow tricks will work on a lawyer." I had already asked the secretary to scan the report and had emailed it to the chairman and his granddaughter. Adding further,
Since then, that finance company has occasionally sent inquiries to our office about whether they had tracked you down. So, I took the liberty of informing them about you as well.
laughing genuinely with delight, Michael suddenly collapsed to his knees.
Please somehow convince them it was all a mistake.
He began to cry, begging the chairman and others to intercede for him. But Richard, with a mocking smile, showed no sympathy.
Why should I, as a lawyer, have to do something as morally reprehensible as telling such blatant lies to a client, especially to someone who has shown kindness, let alone to a young girl in a wheelchair who you've insulted as ugly and defective?
I firmly told Michael. The truth is, my daughter Maria got injured on her way to violin lessons when I took my eyes off her for a moment, and a high school student looking at their phone bumped into her, causing her to fall. Since then, worried about Maria, who tends to get withdrawn, Emily and her kids, knowing she won an art contest, suggested we celebrate. And today, because of Michael, what was supposed to be a joyous occasion turned into a disaster. Richard, utterly enamored with his daughter, must have been furious, not just because of Michael's past shame, but also his vile words towards Maria. Despite being coldly treated by Richard, Michael shamelessly bawled, begging, "Please, a man's future is at stake here. Are you going to ruin it?" as he desperately clung on.
Ruin someone's life? Who are you to say such a thing? The very thing you planned to do to Susan and the chairman's granddaughter was exactly that, ruining someone else's life. What goes around comes around, a giant boomerang coming right back at you. You just have to accept it.
Richard declared, brushing off Michael's attempts to cling further.
The exit is that way.
We called the building security to promptly escort Michael out of the office. As we heard Michael's crying and bitter laments fade away, Richard and I exchanged glances and shared a smile. Afterward, Michael rushed to his girlfriend, the chairman's granddaughter, making excuses, but she had already begun to harbor suspicions against him. The revelation of the truth only fueled her anger, leading her to decisively cut ties with him, refusing to see him again. However, the chairman and the executive vice president, seeing their beloved daughter and granddaughter hurt, were not content to let it end there. Michael, who had tried to reconcile by persistently following her and bombarding her with messages and emails, was reported to the police for suspicion of fraud for attempting to marry and infiltrate the company with a fake resume. Although it didn't escalate to a criminal case, a warning was issued for his stalking behavior. Still, his refusal to give up and multiple instances of stalking eventually led to his arrest and prosecution. He was sentenced to jail time, though he received probation. Once released on bail, he appeared to return to a normal life on the surface, but with a criminal record, he found it impossible to find employment anywhere outside of New York. Desperate, Michael attempted to move to England for work, but his criminal record hindered his visa application, forcing him to abandon the plan. Moreover, after his parents learned everything from the chairman and the police, they disowned him, leaving Michael truly alone. With debts looming and blacklisted from most employment, unable to even own a smartphone or renew his expired driver's license, Michael had no choice but to take any job he could get. Rumor has it, he now works for a handyman service introduced by debt collectors, living in a dorm with no privacy, working tirelessly from dawn till dusk. However, this was none of my concern, and I chose to forget about it as soon as I heard. On the other hand, Richard and I moved to an apartment near the private elementary school Maria would attend, as soon as her injury had fully healed. Ever since that incident, Maria has been hesitant to take the train, so she's been happy with the bus commute and loves the view from our high-rise apartment, seeming joyful every day. When Richard suggested selling our previous home, which was a renovated gift from my in-laws, and moving to an apartment, I was worried about what my in-laws would think. However, after they passed their house to us and started enjoying their second life in a warm coastal town, they reassured us.
What's best for your son, his wife, and our granddaughter is the most important, so don't worry about it.
In fact, they encouraged us.
Being closer to my workplace means more time with family than before, and it was definitely a good decision.
Richard seems to be enjoying the new life as much as Maria. Seeing them both so happy, I've been inspired to try something new myself.
My father passed away. After completing all the arrangements, the funeral was ready, but my husband didn't show up.
He was always in dirty work clothes, doing bottom-rung jobs. It's wasted doing it because there won't be inheritance anyway.
I was speechless. I had run out of patience with him, so it was a clean break for me. After the funeral, when I brought up divorce, he eagerly agreed as if he had been waiting for it. As he was filling out the divorce papers, he smirked and said to me,
"Divorce is fine, but you're the one who's going to have trouble, right?"
"I'm not troubled at all. Probably you are the one who will have trouble. My name is Emily Johnson. I have been working as a clerk since I joined a construction company after graduating from college. I'm getting old enough to be in my early 30s. I am married, but we don't have children. My husband, David, is a natural-born playboy, never running out of stories about gambling machines, horse racing, boat racing, drinking, smoking, and womanizing. There was a time when we tried to have children together, but it got interrupted for a reason and never resumed. I never pressed him, but the reason for the interruption was that my husband had contracted a sexually transmitted disease. Since I haven't had sexual relations with anyone other than my husband after getting married, I had to assume the infection came from his cheating. When I confronted David about it, he said, "I've forgotten about it. It's nothing." He insisted on forget it, don't ask, and I couldn't persuade him to cut back on his womanizing. His bad drinking habits and poor conduct began to stand out more, and my affection for him started to wear thin. One winter while I was married, my father died. Despite my repeated warnings, he wasn't in great health, but since he had no hobbies other than work, he worked all year round. He collapsed at work and was hospitalized, and his condition rapidly worsened until he died at the young age of 58. My father was a sole proprietor. He worked as an independent business owner. He was a diligent man with the skill and knowledge to handle every aspect of a certain field in construction work on his own. Even when the company he contracted with told him to take a day off, he would show up the next day, surprising the younger employees. My mother is not around. It seems that my mother left my father and me because she could not keep up with my father's hard-working personality. That was when I was 4 years old. My father was well regarded for his reliability as a craftsman, thanks to his meticulous care and skill. After my father passed away in the hospital, I started arranging the funeral, and many people who had worked with my father sent telegrams of condolence or called. I was grateful, but dealing with it all was overwhelming, and I made little progress in meeting with the priest. With hardly any time to go home, I spent my days beside my father, who lay on a coffin in a room at the venue. My uncle Tom lived nearby and said I could take a break at his place, but I wanted to stay close to my father. However, from the time I started making funeral arrangements, I repeatedly tried to contact David. No return calls, no replies to messages. He was probably busy with gambling or something. It definitely wasn't work. On the day of the funeral, I respectfully greeted friends, relatives, and professional acquaintances who attended, along with my father's siblings. Some were even clients of the company I work for. He had a wonderful daughter. "Your father must have been very proud," they said kindly, which made me feel humbled. Even after everything was over, I tried contacting my husband again, but still no response.
Emily, you need to think about what you're doing with your life. It's looking pretty bleak if you keep on this way. You know it better than anyone. We're worried about you instead of your father.
Tom's words made me reflect on recent events. Unanswered calls, worthless hobbies, cold attitudes. How could I have been so mistaken to stay with such a person? My tears fell in combination with despair, regret, and exhaustion. While comforting me, Tom said he would be there to support me. On my way home, I stopped by the grocery store to buy some whiskey, my father's favorite. I thought about my future while drinking it. I was surprised when I got home. David was at home. He was drunk out of his mind. He was sprawled out on the living room sofa and asleep. Countless empty beer cans and snack wrappers were scattered all over the coffee table. "What are you doing?" I had to ask, overwhelmed by the smell of alcohol.
"Oh, you're back. Hey, make me a whiskey and water. I'm sick of beer."
David tried to grab a new bottle from the fridge, but realizing there was no ice, he slammed the door shut and looked at me again.
"Oh, look at that. You bought some booze. Hand it over. Don't just stand there."
He reached for the grocery bag I was holding, trying to take out the whiskey my father loved. I instinctively slapped his hand away.
Ouch!
A clear slapping sound confirmed I hit him hard. His already red face from being drunk turned even redder with anger as he glared at me. "Stop it, don't touch me."
Hey, that hurt. What's the big idea all of a sudden?
The atmosphere was charged with tension. Feeling like there was no turning back, I somehow found the words smoothly. "I called you so many times to tell you my father died. Why didn't you come to his funeral?"
Your father doesn't matter.
I couldn't believe my ears. He was, after all, somewhat involved in work related to my father. A little respect would have been appropriate. After all, he was family, even if by marriage.
We only met a couple of times, right? I didn't feel close to him. You didn't actually go through with the funeral, did you?
Of course I did.
You're an idiot. Instead of wasting money on a priest, you should have given it to me. How much did you pay?
I suddenly felt sad. Most of the funeral expenses were covered by my uncles. I only paid a small portion. There was some savings and inheritance that could have covered it. My uncles insisted on paying, saying, "You'll surely need it in the future." How could I tell you how much? It wasn't even that expensive. It wasn't very expensive. I wish I could have given him a better send-off.
What do you mean you can tell your husband? Don't mess with me. Ida don't approve any expensive expenses. Give it to me.
Husband, are you kidding me that your wife's father died and you didn't even attend his funeral, and then you abused her and called him my husband?
All that savings, that's all money I earned. You paid the funeral expenses without my consent. I'll say it as many times as necessary. Don't mess with me. If you're my wife, show some respect to your husband.
If that's how it is, then you not attending my father's funeral means you're not family. I can say he's my partner. If you cared about me even a little, if you loved me, you would have shown some kindness to someone important to me. Let's get divorced. I said it clearly, trying to stay calm.
I'd been wanting to ask you myself. Thinking I left the house in the care of someone like you gives me chills. You've probably been skimming money off little by little, joking around. I'll give you your divorce as much as you want. Get the divorce papers now. You're the one who's going to have trouble. Your dad, always in his filthy work clothes, doing bottom-rung jobs, must be crying too. His daughter can't even appreciate who was providing for her. You've never thanked your dad, have you? I'm not going to be troubled at all. It's you who will have trouble. I've been taking care of you all this time. You were able to live because of me. Regret it, there's no inheritance, couldn't be, and I won't care even if you do regret.
Ignoring my husband's loud voice, I quickly packed my bags. Taking only what I needed, I left the house with my minimal belongings.
Scream all you want.
He followed me to the entrance, hurling insults at my back. I couldn't stop the tears. I stayed at a budget hotel near the station. The male receptionist was polite but gave me a puzzled look at my tear-streaked face and disheveled appearance. I probably looked that bad. All because of my husband. I endured unwarranted yelling. As I entered the elevator with the key, I tried to think about the future calmly. But the image of my husband ranting kept interrupting my thoughts, making it impossible to focus. Frustrated, I couldn't sleep. Unable to sleep, I opened my laptop and looked for a good lawyer, finding that a downloadable divorce form was available. I immediately downloaded it on my phone and printed it at a nearby convenience store. Some local governments might not accept the downloadable form, but the nearest City Hall's website did not provide such information. I immediately filled it out and slammed it into the house's mailbox where my husband was waiting. Then I was exhausted and slept in a hotel bed. The next day, after finishing some errands at work and taking an early leave, I rushed to the lawyer's office. After learning about the procedures and necessary documents, I started preparing. I sent a message to my husband saying I would come to pick up the divorce papers at tonight. He didn't reply, but it was read. I prepared myself for the confrontation. I visited the house during the time my husband was likely to be home, but he wasn't there. It was past 8 o'clock at night. Normally, he would be home by now. I waited. There was plenty to do while waiting. I planned to gather my belongings from inside the house, I gave up on the furniture. I didn't have the energy to move big items. Surprisingly, many of my valuables were missing. Watches, luxury items were gone. Not everything, but noticeably less. Clothes and books were also scarce. My husband had thrown them out. I was tired of crying and being sad. I gathered what was left of my belongings. It only amounted to enough to fit in my large backpack. I took photos of the reduced valuables, the closet, and the sparsely filled bookshelf and sent them to the lawyer I had hired. My husband returned home after 11 p.m.
Hey, they's a thief breaking in. Someone's quietly stealing money. Give back the key, you thief.
It seemed he had been out drinking. His face was flushed, and he looked greasy. And there was even the scent of a perfume that's been popular among young women lately. It wasn't the scent of the perfume my husband usually wore. Just that was enough for me to guess where he had been. Did you throw away my stuff?
Well, I just took back what was stolen. Here, take it, the divorce papers.
I'll sue you for defamation against me and my father.
Do whatever you want. I couldn't care less. I did you a favor by marrying a gloomy office worker like you, a late bloomer with a bad personality. You're the one who's going to have trouble after we split. This is hilarious. You are suing me?
You're the one who's going to have trouble. I won't be troubled at all. I slammed the house keys on the table and left. Then, I really started preparing to sue him. I had the funds, the inheritance. I really didn't want to spend money on this. But there was no choice now. The lawyer was sympathetic. He said it was good that I took photos of where my belongings had gone missing. Things moved smoothly from there. My husband apparently believed I had no inheritance and would be financially troubled. The amount claimed from him for defamation, lack of emotional support as a husband, and for the disposed belongings turned out to be substantial. A sum that meant he'd mostly be stuck with cheap liquor for the rest of his life. Shocked by the number of zeros in the claim, he finally apologized properly.
I'm truly sorry. I apologize.
He kept apologizing, but I wasn't in the mood to concede. I thought I should have done this much earlier. The lawyer was about to wrap up. Following our meeting's agenda, he moved to a business-like explanation after the apology. Then, it was all up to the lawyer. I had several fitting phrases in mind as my final words, but only one seemed right for the occasion. I told you so. You're the one who's going to have trouble. With that, I glanced at my husband, who hung his head deeply. The lawyer continued in a steady tone about what would happen next. During this time, my husband didn't raise his face at all. Despite the lawyer repeatedly asking, "Are you listening? Do you understand?" my husband could only weakly respond, "Yes." After that, I reported the divorce to my father's grave and informed my uncles.
So it turned out for the best, huh? Are you settled now?
Yes, I'm taking it easy now. Work isn't too busy, so I'm not too tired.
Let's all go out for a meal sometime. We'll talk a lot then.
Yes, let's do that. My uncles were very kind. People at work also seemed to have considered my turbulent personal life since my father's passing, not assigning me complex tasks. As promised, I went out for meals with my uncles, enjoying happier days, until I received a call. The call was from my ex-husband.
Sorry to bother you, But could you wait a bit for the monthly payments? Life's been tough lately.
3 messages with similar content were sent to my phone. Something happened.
No, recently, my work just dropped off. The pay isn't great, jobs aren't going well, and people seem colder somehow.
A month later, he informed me he had been laid off.
Regarding the payments,
Similar messages were being sent. I only marked them as read, and after hearing from my lawyer about the consequences of failing to meet payment obligations, I forwarded his response directly to my ex-husband. There was a reason why my ex-husband had suddenly fallen so far. I knew what it was. It was because he didn't attend my father's funeral. My father had worked in the construction industry for many years, handling most of his jobs alone. This led to various connections, which had been beneficial. Of course, I knew that my ex-husband's clients, supervisors, company presidents, and requesting companies were acquainted with my father. They must have reconsidered their opinion of my absent ex-husband after seeing me greet everyone properly at the funeral. My uncle was also well regarded in the industry. When I was told he had become unemployed and wanted to discuss the future, I agreed to meet on the condition that I choose the place. My ex-husband looked poor and nothing like his former self when we met. He didn't seem to have been drinking. When I was told he had become unemployed and wanted to discuss the future, I agreed to meet on the condition that I choose the place. My ex-husband looked poor and nothing like his former self when we met. He didn't seem to have been drinking. We met in a cafe next to a police station, and I chose a corner seat. My ex-husband requested an extension on the payments from start to finish. Yet, looking at him now, I realized my father had left me an inheritance worth more than money, for which I truly had to be grateful. I would cover this payment. A cup of coffee can be considered a parting gift. So, I decided to make a return for that time. Standing up, I said kindly, "I'll cover this," looking down at my ex-husband with plenty of room to spare. He smirked. Cutting off whatever he was about to say, I leaned in close. "Scream all you want." I left the cafe briskly. The wind felt good. I thought it wasn't necessary to choose a place near a police station. As I passed by, a boy and a girl with backpacks walked by the police station. I sincerely wished I could show my father in heaven what his grandchildren would look like. Maybe it's time to give matchmaking a try.
Hey, why don't you divorce me? Huh?
What?
Well, you see, I've been seeing someone else for a while now, and I'm thinking of divorcing you and marrying her.
Seeing someone else? What do you mean? Can you explain properly?
Remember 6 months ago when I went to the dermatologist? I've been dating one of the nurses there. She's 25, and man, being with someone young is something else. We couldn't have a child for 2 years, but with her, bam, it happened in just 6 months. It's been 3 months already.
My husband needs an organ transplant because of his illness, and I intended to keep helping him through it. Yet, despite my plans, I keep getting hit with one shocking statement after another from him. Lost in thought and confusion as I entertain various ideas, I suddenly realized something crucial. "So, you started cheating on me half a year ago, before you even knew about your illness, right?"
Oh yeah, that's right. Anyway, a useless 30-something infertile. Time to disappear, get divorced.
Until now, I never got mad at my husband no matter what he did or what happened, thinking it was because of his unstable emotions due to his illness. However, the affair started before his illness was discovered. So, the illness is irrelevant. In other words, I have every right to be angry. Well, that's too bad. So, shall we get a divorce then? But I won't yell at my husband. I've endured for his sake, and I intended to keep helping him in the future. Yet, he's having an affair with a 25-year-old nurse, and it seems she's even pregnant. Just yelling at him wouldn't be enough. I'll make sure he deeply regrets divorcing me. I'm Abigail, a 32-year-old office worker. I may be just an average person when it comes to skills and evaluations, but I do love my job, and I've been doing my best in my own way. Can we call this being dedicated to my work? I married Travis 2 years ago, and we don't have any children yet. I met Travis about 5 years ago at a gathering with mutual acquaintances. He was a friend of a friend at the time, and it was our first meeting.
Abigail, what kind of job do you do? Do you have Sundays off? What do you do on your days off? Do you have any free days?
Travis, are you drunk? You should ease up a bit, or getting home will be tough. Oh, excuse me, I need to step away for a moment. Around halfway through the gathering, Travis, who had been drinking, started getting too close to me. As someone who is focused on work and not interested in romance, I politely brushed him off with a smile, but when he became persistently annoying, I sought refuge in the restroom. Returning would mean dealing with him again. While looking at myself in the restroom mirror, I let out a sigh. However, in the reflection, there was also a part of me that didn't seem entirely uninterested. I've always avoided romance, so being approached so boldly like this is something I haven't experienced much. But no matter what, getting attention from the opposite sex still feels good. When I returned to my seat, Travis started talking to me again.
Abigail, which days do you have off?
I have Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays off, just like the calendar. We exchanged contact information, and even after the gathering, he continued to pursue me, and we ended up dating. At the gathering, I thought he was just drunk and being annoying to everyone, but it turns out he was using the alcohol as a way to talk to me. My first impression of him was terrible, but if it wasn't for his liquid courage, I probably wouldn't have ended up dating him. You never know how things will turn out in life. 3 years after we met, we got married. People were surprised that someone like me, who was so focused on work, got married, and I was surprised too. I never thought I'd get married myself. Dating Travis and seriously considering love and marriage seems to have changed my values. People change depending on their circumstances and environment. I was happy with married life with my husband. However, it's been 2 years since we got married. Now, I'm starting to regret getting married, thinking maybe I was better off single. We still haven't been able to have children. I'm 32 years old, and Travis is 37, so I'm starting to feel anxious about our ages. But it seemed strange to me that we still hadn't been able to have children, so I decided to undergo infertility testing. And now, I have to tell him the result with a heavy heart.
So, did you find out the results of the test today? How was it?
It looks like I'm infertile after all.
I see.
But listen, if we undergo treatment, there's about a 30% chance of success. and with repeated treatments, the chances increase.
Is that so? Then we can have children, right?
Feeling hopeful at my words, Travis brightens up. But now, I have to tell him something that will darken his expression again. I brighten his expression beforehand just to lessen his emotional burden, even if just a little. With a somber expression again, I deliver the sad truth. But you see, infertility treatments usually take around 2 years on average.
That long, huh?
As anticipated, his expression darkens once more. In 2 years, I'll be in my mid-30s and Travis will be almost 40. Of course, I still intend to persevere. But he furrows his brow, looks away, and drops his gaze to the floor with a troubled expression. Where are you going alone?
Mind your own business. What I do on my days off is my business.
Once Travis found out I'm infertile, he noticeably changed. He ignores me or yells when I try to talk to him. When he does initiate conversation, he only says basic things like meal, shower, or going to bed. As his attitude has changed so much, and the cause is clear, it actually feels refreshing. But there's something that bothers me no matter how much Travis ignores me or yells at me, and I make sure to persistently bring it up to him. You seem to be scratching again. Did you go to the hospital?
Shut up. You don't need to say unnecessary things.
As usual, I get yelled at. But I watch Travis scratching his belly with concern. Lately, he's been itching all over his body. If it's an illness, it's best to find out as soon as possible. Since I've experienced it myself, I keep telling Travis to go to the hospital, but he becomes stubborn when I tell him to. So Travis doesn't go to the hospital and just endures the itching unnecessarily. And the itching doesn't go away on its own, it only gets worse over time. You're scratching so much. Wouldn't it be better to go to the hospital?
Yeah, maybe this seems kind of weird.
Unusually, Travis responds properly to my words and agrees to go. It seems like he's reached the limit of his itching. When Travis returned from the dermatologist, he seemed unusually cheerful. Sitting on the living room sofa with a happy expression, he began applying the ointment he got from the hospital to his body. What did they say at the hospital?
Since the cause isn't clear, they said to apply the anti-itch cream for now and see how it goes. Finally, I'll be relieved from this itchiness.
Perhaps because the itching was quite severe, Travis seemed to be applying the ointment excessively to the point where I thought it might be too much. I considered giving him a warning, but since he was unusually cheerful, I decided to leave him be. Thanks to the medication, the itching seemed to have improved slightly, and Travis remained in good spirits. Maybe because the itching had lessened, he found it easier to go out, as he started dining out after work and wouldn't return home until late on weekends when he went out alone. It's a wife's duty to worry if her husband comes home late. However, since we hardly talk when he's home, and I'd only end up taking care of him, I feel more at ease when Travis is out. He's in a good mood anyway, so I thought it was fine for him to stay out for a while longer. However, despite risking Travis's mood, there's something I need to address. Lately, you haven't been going to the dermatologist. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Even if I go, I'll just get more anti-itch cream. I still have some left, so I'll go when it runs out.
But the doctor told you to come to the hospital, didn't he?
God, you're always so naggy. I know my body better than anyone. If I say I'm fine, then I'm fine.
While saying he's fine, Travis scratches his arm vigorously. He went to the dermatologist about 3 times, but then he suddenly stopped going. Although he's applying the anti-itch cream, it only eases the itch. It doesn't make it go away completely. That's why I've been reminding Travis to go to the hospital properly. I might seem like a nuisance at home, but regardless, I worry about him. However, if I try to remind him, he ends up yelling at me as usual. Travis's bizarre logic seems to outweigh the knowledge and expertise of doctors. If Travis's itch could be cured by his bizarre theories, that would be fine, but it seemed far from reality, and his condition worsened. Hey, are you okay? Your eyes look yellow?
Yeah, I'm fine. But I'm not feeling well, so I'm taking another day off work today.
6 months after Travis stopped going to the dermatologist. He couldn't even get out of bed and was scratching his body while lying down. The itching seems to have gotten even stronger, and it looks like he's been scratching his body while sleeping. There are spots of bleeding, and the bed is also stained with blood. It's okay to take a day off work, but please make sure to go to the hospital.
I said I'm fine. It'll heal if I get some rest.
Enough already. Your eyes look strange, and you're covered in blood, and you're still saying that?
Forget about me. Just go to work.
Travis yelled, but his voice wasn't as loud as usual. In this situation, I couldn't possibly indulge his stubbornness. So, I decided to take a day off work myself and forcefully take Travis to the hospital. Refusing to go to the hospital out of stubbornness, I left him lying down for the time being and prepared to head to the hospital. When I returned to the bedroom after about 10 minutes, it seemed like he had been on the phone with his company as he was holding his smartphone in his hand. Hey, are you ready to change? We're going to the hospital.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Perhaps someone from his company had advised him to go to the hospital over the phone. Travis seemed unusually compliant compared to before. Since that worked better for me, I didn't say anything and just took him to the hospital in the car. After undergoing tests at the hospital, Travis was diagnosed with primary biliary cholangitis. It's a condition where the bile ducts inside the liver break down and stop functioning properly. In the early stages, simply taking medication allows for a normal life, but if the disease progresses, the same treatment as for cirrhosis of the liver is required. Of course, Travis ended up receiving treatment for cirrhosis of the liver. If he had been going to the dermatologist regularly, the doctor might have noticed something at some point and referred him to a major hospital. Therefore, it's not unreasonable to say that his delayed diagnosis was his own fault. Travis, upon hearing from the doctor that he had a serious illness, sat there staring at the floor in a daze. Since it seemed like the doctor's words weren't getting through to him anymore, I made sure to listen carefully in his place. And then I was told something even more shocking. If treatment for cirrhosis of the liver doesn't show any improvement, a liver transplant is necessary, and without that surgery, it's a matter of life and death. Travis and I, both feeling overwhelmed by the reality we wanted to avoid, returned home feeling disoriented. It'll be okay, I'm sure. A donor will be found soon.
Stop trying to comfort me. My illness, unlike your infertility, is life-threatening, and finding a donor won't be easy.
Travis replied sharply, his voice now low, exuding considerable intimidation. His eyes had become sharp, too, glaring at me as I tried to offer words of encouragement. Travis was left to wait for a donor while undergoing outpatient treatment. As he said, finding a donor wouldn't be easy. The number of registered donors is small, and it seems that many donors are not found. The only consolation is that the liver he'll be transplanting is still one of the more frequently transplanted ones. In a less than ideal situation, he became reckless.
What's this? This god-awful food.
Didn't the doctor say that the yellowing around your eyes was due to cholesterol? You were told to increase your fiber intake, so it's only natural for meals to be veggie-centric.
Shut up. With my time running short, how can I eat this crap?
Travis swept all the dishes off the table with his arm. When I saw this happen in a drama, I thought, does anyone really do that? But now it's happening right in front of me. I gathered the pieces of the broken plates. Travis, in his desperation, quit his job and has been like this every day at home. The other day, he got angry because the TV wasn't interesting and threw the remote at the screen, breaking the TV. We went to the hospital together, and he was indifferent in front of the doctor.
I see. Oh, okay then.
Like a sulking child being scolded by a teacher, he doesn't listen properly, just nods along while the doctor speaks. So once again, I'll be the one to listen to the doctor's words. Considering Travis's feelings, it's understandable that he's acting out. That's why I try not to complain or scold him. However, even considering that he's ill, there are unforgivable things happening.
Hey, why don't you divorce me? Huh?
What? When I came home from work and was still in the middle of taking off my shoes, Travis smirked and threw the idea of divorce at me. I stopped taking off my shoes, unable to understand his thoughts. Even though the treatment for his illness will continue, does he really want a divorce from me? As I pondered, Travis explained his reasons without hesitation.
The thing is, I've been seeing someone else for a while now, and I want to divorce you and marry her.
What? My head was spinning more and more. He's been seeing someone else all this time? Could that be considered cheating? Unable to grasp the meaning of his words, I slowly made my way to the living room to listen to him properly. So, when you say you've been seeing someone else, what does that mean? Can you explain?
Remember when I went to the dermatologist 6 months ago? I've been seeing one of the nurses there. She's 25, which is pretty amazing, right? Even though we couldn't have a kid for 2 years, I managed to get her pregnant in just 6 months. It's been 3 months already.
Travis, resigned to his short life, explained everything to me. I was too shocked by the successive shocking statements to say anything, and my mind started spinning with various thoughts at high speed. As I contemplated, I began to understand his behavior over the past 6 months. He was in high spirits after visiting the dermatologist, and he started coming home late around the time he started going there. Despite adamantly refusing to go to the hospital when his illness was discovered, he suddenly became compliant and went. I remember he was holding his smartphone at that time. Perhaps when Travis made that call, it wasn't to his company but to his affair partner, wasn't it? Maybe the affair partner was worried about Travis, had been urging him to go to the hospital, and on that day, she called him seeking help, scolding him to go to the hospital. In just a few seconds, various thoughts raced through my mind. After finishing understanding the situation and speculating, I realized something crucial. If you started the affair 6 months ago, that means it was before your illness was discovered, right?
Oh, yeah. Anyway, a useless guy in her 30s with infertility should disappear. Let's divorce.
Travis keeps saying divorce with a grin on his face. Until now, I had never gotten angry no matter what Travis did or what happened to him, thinking it was because of his unstable feelings due to the illness. However, the affair happened before the illness was discovered. Therefore, the illness is irrelevant. In other words, I can get angry, right? Too bad. Then, shall we get divorced? However, I won't yell at Travis. I've put up with him and was planning to continue supporting him. And yet, he's having an affair with a 25-year-old nurse who apparently is even pregnant. Just yelling at him won't cut it. I want him to regret divorcing me thoroughly. The next day, I quickly got the divorce papers and decided to fill them out together with Travis.
It's so smooth to get this divorce. It's a relief.
He's smiling so brightly, you wouldn't think he's sick as he effortlessly fills in the form. Then it's my turn to sign. Well, I'll file this divorce papers myself, so I'll keep them for now.
Oh, I'm just sorry for everything.
Also, this isn't needed anymore, so I'll give it to you. Please keep it for reference for your future treatment.
Huh? What's this document?
I pull the divorce papers towards me and instead hand over a certain document to Travis. This is a document for a living liver transplant.
A living liver transplant?
Even though Travis should have heard the explanation together with me, he reacts as if he's hearing it for the first time. Seems like he didn't listen properly to what the doctor was saying after all. When we think of transplants, it's easy to imagine removing organs from deceased individuals. However, for some organs, it's possible to remove them from living donors and transplant them to patients. The liver, which Travis needs for transplantation, is one such organ. The criteria vary depending on the hospital, but it seems that it's possible if the donor is a relative within the fourth degree or a spouse, among other close relationships. However, in the case of a living liver transplant, if there are potential donors willing to provide the organ, the transplant surgery can proceed without waiting for a match to be found. There's no need to wait until a donor is found. I've been undergoing tests on my body and liver condition to become Travis's donor. The document I placed in front of Travis is related to those tests.
Why did you hide such a treatment option?
I didn't exactly hide it. It's your fault for not paying attention both to what the doctor said and what I said. I was talking to the doctor right in front of you about becoming a donor. You weren't listening properly, so you probably just thought it was about people already on the donor registry, didn't you?
But normally, wouldn't you tell me about it if you were going to get tested to be a donor, would you?
True. I did quietly proceed with the donor testing because I thought you hadn't noticed anything. But that's because if I had failed the donor test, it would have devastated you again. So I planned to tell you when I knew I could report good results. After hearing my explanation, Travis picked up the document in front of him and began to read through it. However, the details written on it were quite complex, so he probably wouldn't be able to understand the content just by skimming through it. Deciding to clarify what the document meant, I said, "According to the test results, it seems I can become your donor without any issues."
Really?
Travis brightened up upon hearing that I could be a donor. But I have to convey something that will quickly darken that expression. After that, We just need to confirm both your and my intentions. But of course, I don't want to donate organs to someone like you.
Huh? Why would it turn out like that after going through the tests? Isn't it just about having the transplant surgery?
I wouldn't help someone who got his mistress pregnant. Upon hearing that I wouldn't be a donor, Travis's expression clouded over. However, knowing that there was someone in front of him who could be his donor, he must have thought he couldn't miss this chance. In the next moment, he appealed to me with an expression mixed with panic and fear.
If you don't become a donor, my life won't last long, you know. Are you really going to abandon a life that can be saved? You heartless person.
It's quite a painful remark for something thought up on the spot. Certainly, abandoning a life that can be saved, no matter who the person is not a pleasant thing to contemplate. However, I'm not the only one who can save Travis's life. Don't say such unkind things like abandoning a life. It doesn't have to be me as the donor, does it?
Yeah. Come to think of it, wives can be donors too, right? So that means even a remarried partner can be a donor.
That's right. So ask that 25-year-old nurse for help. But since she's pregnant, surgery won't be possible for a while. And also, without her consent, nothing can be done.
I got it. Well, if that's the case, then I don't need you anymore. I wasted my time getting anxious.
Upon hearing that his mistress could also be a donor, Travis looked at me with a disdainful expression. Realizing he didn't need me anymore, he seemed to have decided he didn't need to keep me in a good mood anymore. His thinking at times like this is quite transparent. After that, Travis and I divorced and I moved out, starting to live on my own. I have some savings left and I have a job, so there's no problem with my life. But it's just like returning to the life I had before marriage. A month after the divorce, while I was focused on my work, Travis, my ex-husband, called me. I wondered if there was something related to the divorce that he needed to discuss.
I beg you, please help me. You're the only one I can rely on now.
The moment I answered the phone, his first words were so loud that I instinctively moved my smartphone away from my ear. He seems quite agitated. What's wrong?
My supposed-to-be remarriage partner ran away from me.
Huh? Seriously? I couldn't help but laugh at the unexpected turn of events.
I asked her to marry me and become a donor after giving birth, but she immediately said no. Wouldn't you become a donor for your husband? That's normal.
And then, what did you do after being rejected?
It's a matter of life and death for me. So even after being rejected multiple times, I kept begging her wholeheartedly. But then she disappeared and I couldn't reach her.
I was astonished by Travis's actions and mindset. I understand that it's a matter of life and death for him. However, there are risks for the donor too. Since it involves surgery, it can leave scars on the body, and since it involves organ donation, there's also the risk of decreased body function or even illness. No matter how much the partner is pregnant with a child and about to get married, it's not easy to simply nod along when the burden of that risk falls on a young woman of just 25 who hasn't even been together for a year. Even I, who spent 5 years dating and then married, intending to support my husband, felt a little anxious when it came to becoming a donor. If she's pushed into such a critical decision as if she's being coerced, she's not exactly in an easy spot either. I understand why the affair partner would want to run away. And I can also understand Travis's feelings of wanting to cling to me after being abandoned by the affair partner, but it's a shame, but I can't help you anymore.
Don't say that. Help me out. The test results must have shown that you can be a donor, right?
Listen, we're already divorced, so we're complete strangers now. Didn't I tell you that only relatives can undergo living liver transplants?
But then,
I'm not going to marry you again. I firmly rejected Travis's plea. It's really easy to predict what he'll say in moments like this.
what? What should I do?
Since you don't have any siblings, it's just your parents, right? How old are your parents again?
Well, I think my dad is 67 and my mom is 66.
Too bad. Living liver transplants have an age requirement of 20 years or older, but younger than 65. You'll have to give up and wait for a donor to be found through donor registration.
But what if they don't find one? Does that mean I only have 10 more years to live?
I've been thinking about this for a while, but why do you assume it's only 10 years? Having a life expectancy of 10 years usually applies to people with rapidly progressing illnesses. The progression of illness varies from person to person, and in your case, you might live for another 30 or 40 years, right?
But you never know what might happen.
You divorced because you saw your affair partner as a potential donor and thought that a woman in her 30s who couldn't conceive was useless, right? Since we're complete strangers now, besides divorce-related matters, please don't call me. Travis kept crying and pleading, but since it had nothing to do with me, I decided to hang up. Well, good luck. I looked at the screen of my hung-up phone and silently cheered for Travis as an acquaintance in my heart. Travis seems to be alone, going through treatment while waiting for a donor, after divorcing me and being abandoned by his affair partner. Although he quit his job, he had savings from 15 years of work, so for now, he's managing by dipping into his savings. However, both treatment and living expenses are draining his funds. He also has to pay me alimony for the affair and child support for the child his affair partner is going to have. As a result, his savings will likely disappear in no time. Travis knows he needs to find a job before he runs out of money, but it's tough to find work while dealing with an illness, so he's struggling to secure employment. Since he chose to let go of someone who was there to support him, I believe he should figure things out on his own. I've returned to focusing solely on my job. While Travis may be going through a rough patch after our divorce, I've come to realize that being single suits me. By focusing on work, it seems my perspective has changed once again. Until the time comes for that policy to change again, I'll keep working hard for a while.
Despite being hospitalized with dietary restrictions, Michelle snuck a bunch of snacks into her room and gobbled them down. If you keep this up, it could be life-threatening. When I scolded her, Michelle shouted back,
"If you had cooked healthy meals, I wouldn't have gotten sick."
"Stop taking it out on me." Then she spat this at me.
"Look at you. You are just like a parasite of my dad."
With a sneer and a furious glare, she stared me down.
"Just get divorced and disappear."
Okay. As I returned to the car, I got a call from Tom. I told him about the altercation with Michelle, and he yelled at me.
"Michelle is sick. You need to be more supportive."
Without responding, I hung up. I decided to take a break from them and move to a hotel, but then Anna showed me this picture, and it changed my mind. As Michelle wishes, I am willing to divorce. But before that, I'm going to expose the true face of the dad she adores so much. This is going to be fun. I'm Nancy, a 45-year-old housewife. I married my colleague Tom 5 years ago. Caught up in work, I was late in my 30s. I had given up after missing chances to marry, but 7 years ago, Tom, who transferred to my department, pursued me intensely. After 2 years of dating, we got married. Tom had divorced his previous wife due to her infidelity, and he had a young daughter named Michelle. My parents and friends were concerned, but Michelle seemed innocent and adorable when I met her during our engagement, and I was ecstatic to have a child as soon as we married. Even though we weren't blood related, I was determined to care for her dearly. However, my resolve soon began to shake. At the time of our marriage, Michelle, then in 6th grade, loved video games, music, and eating. She would lie on the living room sofa, immersing herself in video games and music, constantly munching on something. Eating too many snacks will ruin your appetite for dinner. It's a common line parents say to their children, but Michelle would not listen. After all, she was constantly devouring a massive amount of snacks every day, in addition to her 3 meals. Even considering a growing appetite, she was eating 2 pancakes and 2 bags of potato chips before dinner, with a large serving of fried chicken and 2 baguettes for dinner, and it was clearly too much. Since she wasn't in any sports clubs, she naturally became quite plump. Michelle, I think you're overeating a bit. It's not good for your health, and you tend to leave vegetables and only eat fried foods and meat. When I couldn't stand it anymore and scolded her, she grimaced as if annoyed.
Leave me alone. You're not my real mom, you're just a stranger.
But Michelle cut me off before I could finish.
You might cook okay, but you really should fix your nagging, or Dad might leave you.
Her cheeky tone really got to me, but when I consulted Tom, he just laughed it off.
Come on. It's just a phase. Go easy on her.
But Michelle really eats too much, don't you think? I pleaded patiently. I think it's bad for your health to eat so much snacks. You get angry when there's no food at home, so I keep snacks stocked, but you devour them immediately, and you don't like low-calorie options like dried fruits.
I used to have a huge appetite as a kid too, but it settled down before I hit 30. Don't worry about it.
Tom laughed, looking down at his slim physique. But Tom had been in the basketball team through college. It's not really comparable because the amount of exercise was totally different, but it's hard to get through to Tom when he dotes on Michelle so much. Eventually, as Michelle entered middle school, she started hanging out with her friends who look vulgar. As Michelle started going to band concerts right before tests and not coming home until late at night, she also began piercing her ears with friends and wearing increasingly flashy clothes. Piercing that many holes as a middle schooler, and are you doing it at home too? That's just crazy. I sternly scolded Michelle. You need to pierce them in a sanitary place to avoid the risk of bacterial infection.
Nancy's such a worrywart.
Tom said leisurely next to a pouting Michelle.
It's really not a big deal.
Exactly. You might be too timid to do it yourself, but my friends and I aren't scared at all.
Michelle boasted, and I felt like holding my head in my hands. That's not the point at all.
Yes, you're just out of touch with the modern fashion because you're an old lady. Dad gets it, right?
Seeking agreement, Tom gave Michelle a forced smile.
Of course. Michelle looks cute no matter what she does.
That's my dad. You always understand me.
Seeing Tom's affectionate face made me want to let them do whatever they want. Despite being a student preparing for exams, Michelle neglected her studies in favor of gaming and music and predictably panicked before advancing to higher education. She barely made it into the lowest ranked school in the county, But soon after enrollment, she often felt unwell. Her body felt heavy, tired, and she complained of stomach pains and nausea, even running a slight fever. When we went to the local clinic, they said it was probably stress from school life. At first, I thought so too, but as it happened repeatedly, I suggested Michelle should go to a general hospital.
I'm sensitive, you know. I hate injections and tests.
Michelle whined, and Tom agreed with her.
It's cruel to make her go unnecessarily. Let's just wait and see a little longer.
But what if it's a serious illness? Tom and I aren't home during the day. What if something happens to her? Michelle said matter-of-factly.
Why don't you just quit your job then?
Exactly. If Nancy takes care of Michelle, I'd be able to work with peace of mind. You could rush her to the hospital if needed.
I was momentarily at a loss for words. But Michelle is your daughter, Tom?
Don't be so cold. She's Nancy's daughter too, isn't she? Blood related or not.
Exactly. Dad earns more than you anyway. No one would miss you at work, right?
Disheartened as I found fulfillment in my job, but arguing against, for the sake of our daughter, was tough. Reluctantly, I filed for resignation at my workplace. Then, Michelle began to treat me like a servant. As soon as she returned from school, it started.
You forgot to buy pudding. Run to the bakery by the station now. Rub my legs. I'm feeling heavy. Also, my shoulders and back too, please. Hey, why chicken soup? I'm in the mood for steak today. Throw out the chicken soup and make some steak.
When she felt unwell, her mood was even worse. She'd call me to her bedroom on her cell phone in the middle of the night because she couldn't sleep, and I had to listen to endless trivial stories.
This guy is sucking up to the teacher and it's so annoying. Hey, are you listening? Don't fall asleep.
Eventually, she'd even make unreasonable demands like healing her headache. Hey Tom, can't you do something about Michelle? Exhausted from lack of sleep and mental fatigue, I finally broke down to Tom. I understand that Michelle wants to be pampered when she is sick, but being lashed out at this much is too much for me. Tom frowned and sighed.
You are Michelle's mom. You should be able to handle this much. Kids' whims are supposed to be cute, right?
If you say so, why don't you take over on weekends then? Tom shrugged his shoulders with a troubled look.
I'm working to support you guys. Don't you get that? At least listen to your adorable daughter's requests with a smile.
Then at least, could you come home a bit earlier? I insisted desperately. Lately, you've been working late a lot, and there's more weekend work and overnight trips. Spend some more time with Michelle, will you?
It is impossible. I'm too busy. Michelle is all yours, Nancy.
Tom pushes his daughter off on me and hardly involves himself. Day by day, I started distrusting him. Tom was casual about it, but when Michelle had been sick for a year, even he started to feel the urgency.
A colleague suggested she might have a liver problem. Let's get her checked out properly at the hospital.
Okay.
He did not listen to me, but Tom's colleague told him about Michelle's health. He has changed his mind. I was frustrated, but I went with them to the hospital. After a series of tests, it turned out Michelle did have cirrhosis.
She's showing signs of jaundice and has fluid buildup. She's at grade B right now. It's not immediately life-threatening, but it has significantly worsened. Why did you let it go this far?
I'm sorry.
Usually Tom and Michelle are carefree, but this time they were somber.
It seems she developed cirrhosis from hepatitis C. Can you think of a cause? Like using a piercing gun on yourself without proper sterilization, perhaps?
Yes.
Michelle gasped. See, this is what I told them. Realizing the shallowness of her actions, Michelle looked like she was about to cry and bit her lip.
Will she need surgery?
Tom asked anxiously, and the doctor answered calmly.
First, she'll be admitted for nutritional and exercise guidance. But if it continues like this, it could progress to liver cancer. It would be best to consider a liver transplant once her condition stabilizes.
Understood.
As the nurse escorted Michelle to her room, Tom and I decided to go home to prepare for her hospital stay. Driving back, Tom said,
Let's register for a living liver transplant. If we wait for a donor to appear, Michelle's condition might worsen.
That sounds right.
Thanks, Nancy.
What? I stared at Tom's profile. You're registering too, right?
Nat, I can't handle the pain.
I couldn't believe my ears.
Donors can have complications like bowel obstruction or duodenal ulcers. It would be bad if it happened to me, right? I'm the breadwinner.
But still, is it okay if it's me? I wanted to ask.
Don't worry. It's usually not life-threatening. They say the liver regenerates quickly even if a part is cut out. It's no big deal.
Tom said with a breezy smile, but I was left feeling uneasy. Yet, I couldn't just sit by and watch Michelle's condition worsen. I was the match from the compatibility tests, so I alone registered as a donor. Now, whenever Michelle's condition improves, my liver can be transplanted to her. Honestly, I was terrified, but blood-related or not, I am her mother. I wanted to be there for her, even just a little. After some time, the hospital clerk contacted us. Michelle's condition had stabilized, and they wanted to schedule the liver transplant surgery. Michelle dislikes me, so if she knew I was the donor, she might refuse. I asked the doctor to keep it a secret. Soon, the surgery date was set, and I went to the hospital for tests. I stopped by Michelle's room on the way out and was stunned. Despite being on a dietary restriction, she had brought a bunch of snack foods from the shop into her room and was devouring them. I lost my temper and scolded her sharply. You know your condition, right? If you keep this up, it could be life-threatening. Take your health seriously for once. Then Michelle blamed me as she spat out bits of snacks.
It's all your fault in the first place.
What?
If you had made healthier snacks and meals over these past 5 years, I wouldn't have gotten sick. Take some responsibility.
Her outrageous blame made me feel weak. What are you talking about? You're the one who always begged me for high-calorie foods and snacks. Stop taking your frustrations out on me. I retorted sharply, and Michelle sneered.
All you do is order me around. It's so annoying,
she said in a low voice, contorting her face in disgust.
I don't need you anymore. I don't even want to see you. Acting all high and mighty like Dad's parasite. Just get lost and disappear.
Her words, filled with hatred, struck my heart like sharp arrows. My excitement quickly cooled, and I felt a chill. Understood. I said that and left the hospital room. As I got back to the car, Tom called me on the phone, so I told him about my exchange with Michelle, only to be yelled at furiously.
What? Are you stupid? Michelle is sick. You need to be more supportive.
But
what if her condition worsens from the stress?
I felt utterly miserable. Why do I have to hear such things? Without responding, I hung up the phone and drove out of the parking lot. I went home, packed my essentials into a suitcase, and left the house. I didn't want to see their faces for a while, so I decided to stay at a hotel. The next day, I met my friend Anna at a cafe to talk about Tom and Michelle. Anna made a grim face.
I think.
She started to say but paused. After fiddling with her phone for a while, she showed me a picture. I gasped involuntarily.
You should really look into this.
Yes, thank you. I replied in a firm voice and had Anna send the picture to my phone. As I looked at it, intense anger welled up inside me and my body heated up. As Michelle wishes, I am willing to divorce. But before that, I'm going to expose the true face of the dad you adore so much. This is going to be fun. After parting with Anna, I went straight to a real estate agent and signed a contract for a weekly rental apartment. I arranged movers and transferred all my belongings there. I found a full-time job and started working immediately. I had been ignoring calls and messages from Tom, but 3 days later, after I got home, I checked my phone to find 50 missed calls. Reluctantly, I called back, only to be yelled at with furious intensity.
Where are you? Why haven't you come home? Why did you send the divorce papers without saying anything?
It's none of your business. As Tom was talking fast and furious, I responded to him, and he became even angrier.
Don't joke around. You're Michelle's mother, aren't you?
I involuntarily pulled the phone away from my ear.
You even refused Michelle's liver transplant. Get back to the hospital and re-register now.
No, I won't donate mine to her anymore. I spoke firmly, and I could hear Tom sigh over the phone.
Being stubborn over a fight like that is childish. It's disgraceful for someone your age.
Say whatever you want.
Nancy, don't you love your daughter?
We're strangers, aren't we? Besides, I've never once thought she was cute since we got married. I let out all my true feelings. Did you submit the divorce papers, by the way?
Of course not. If we divorce, you'll no longer be a relative, and you won't be able to donate.
Tom's irritated response made me sigh. Why are you so fixated on me? You're her biological father. You should be the donor. Tom dismissively brushed off what seemed like an obvious suggestion.
Because I hate pain, remember? And aren't there after effects from surgery?
It seems so.
Then I'm passing on that. Michelle's life isn't in immediate danger anyway. If you refuse, we'll just wait for another donor.
Well, it's clear now. He cares more about himself than his daughter. Tom's insistence was so self-centered it was astonishing. I'll visit the hospital room next week. There's something we need to discuss. I said that and hung up the phone. A week later, I went to Michelle's hospital room as promised, and she started yelling the moment she saw me.
You old woman. Don't just go off on your own. Get back to the doctor and re-register as a donor now.
Is this how you ask for a favor? I was dismayed. The dad and child are utterly clueless. What? No, you're the one who told me that you don't need me, and you want to get divorced and leave.
That was just a slip of the tongue.
Michelle stammered her excuses.
I don't want my parents to split up because of me, right, Dad? Dad, you don't really want to divorce Nancy, do you?
Usually, she calls me old lady or aunt, but now she uses my name when it suits her. Seeing Michelle appeal to Tom with puppy eyes, Tom nodded so vigorously it looked like his head might fall off.
Of course. I want to stay together happily as a family.
Tom said with a pasted smile. I handed him the photos and the investigation report I had pulled from my bag. Oh, really? But it seems like Michelle has another happy family. Michelle's face turned pale as she peered at the photo.
Hey, Michelle, you've been meeting him behind my back?
Tom's question was tinged with anger, and Michelle responded hesitantly.
Well.
Tom slammed the photo down on the hospital room table. In the picture, Michelle was with a plump woman and a slim man in a suit. Obviously, she was enjoying a meal together at a restaurant, and it was likely taken covertly from a nearby table. Another photo showed the three of them, beaming as they walked down a major street, hands full of high-end shopping bags.
Hey, how did you know I was meeting with my mom and her new husband? Having a detective agency investigate me? That's so mean of you.
Michelle snapped back, and I explained. When I was cleaning, I went into your room and noticed all those brand bags. You don't even have a job, so where did all that money come from?
Just leave me alone.
I can't just ignore it. I am your mother after all. I smiled at Michelle and she glared back at me. Also, there were times you'd come home from eating out, reeking of perfume. You said you were out with friends, but I knew that was a lie.
I didn't notice at all.
As Tom tilted his head, Michelle pursed her lips in response.
It was always when I was already home from taking a shower or late on weekends.
Oh, is that so?
Tom scratched his head and laughed. That's why I felt suspicious multiple times and hired a detective. It turns out you weren't hanging out with bad friends, which is a relief.
Mind your own business. Sorry, Dad. I couldn't refuse Mom when she insisted.
Michelle tried to sweet-talk Tom with a flattering smile.
Yeah, I get it,
Tom said with a forced smile. However, his smile faded instantly after I played a recording.
Mom, our dad is such a cheapskate. He works for a big corporation, but he only gives me $100 a month for allowance. Can you believe that? I can barely buy one outfit. Living like this is so tough.
Michelle, this is very tough for you, but just bear with it for now. And in the future, you can marry a businessman like my darling.
A man's voice joined in with Michelle's mother, speaking in a similarly saccharine tone.
Michelle, you should come live with us. I'll buy you anything you want.
But then I'd have to move and I wouldn't see my friends anymore. And it'd be sad to leave Dad alone, right? He hardly has any friends.
That's so true. You're too kind not to abandon Dad.
The three of them laughed uproariously, turning Tom's ears red. Michelle turned pale and curled up on the bed.
Michelle, this is pretty bad, Tom finally said after a long silence.
After a moment of silence, Tom opened his mouth.
You know the reason we divorced was because Mom cheated with him, right? And now you're secretly meeting up with him.
His tone was calm, but his eyes were filled with anger, making Michelle flustered.
But Mom's new husband is a really nice guy. He buys me everything I want and takes me to fancy restaurants. Honestly, I think Mom made the right choice remarrying him.
In her panic, Michelle dug herself deeper.
Dad even hates going to conveyor belt sushi, despite working for such a big company. Why don't we have money? It's not like I see Dad gambling.
Then Tom's face twisted with anger.
Kids shouldn't worry about that. It's probably because you've been eating fancy meals behind my back every month that you ended up with hepatitis C leading to cirrhosis. From now on, meeting them is forbidden.
Don't you know? Even if you divorce, children still have the right to see their parents.
Michelle retorted stubbornly.
I had hoped marrying this woman would mean a better salary and more luxury. But all I got was a meager allowance, no eating out, and more nagging from the old lady. There's no point in staying at home.
That's how you were buttering me up during our engagement. One mystery was solved, and I felt relieved. I let out a slight smile, and Timo spoke to Michelle with a smug look.
Listen, I'm working my butt off to support you. You think I enjoy doing overtime and business trips?
But Dad...
I'm saving up for your future. Isn't that more important than living luxuriously now?
I stared at Tom as he lectured Michelle.
What's up?
Tom asked, looking displeased, and I smiled. I talked to your boss the other day. Remember, I used to work in the same department with you, so I know him?
What did you talk about?
Michelle also listened intently. I mentioned that you've been too busy to be at home much. I asked if there was any way to reduce your overtime, weekend work, and trips. He seemed puzzled. Tom suddenly avoided my gaze. He probably knew what was going to be said next. The boss said, "Our department is actually slow right now. Hardly any overtime or weekend work, and definitely no business trips. Everyone's leaving on time every day. Strange, isn't it?" Then, I fiddled with my phone, bringing up an image. I also pulled out several photos and a report from my bag, placing them next to documents about Michelle. Wow, you're a regular at a bar in the downtown area, going there 4 nights a week after work? No wonder you're home late at night. Michelle's eyes widened as she snatched the report from my hand. As she read through the documents, her expression turned demonic. Michelle was holding the documents with her trembling hands, and she read aloud in a low voice.
On the weekends, Tom spent at an apartment bought for a 20-year-old woman, staying till morning, occasionally accompanying her to work. Every 2 or 3 months, going on trips.
It's like you're living together. Do you even realize your wife and daughter are waiting at home?
It's my salary, and I can spend it however I want.
Tom retorted, sulking.
I am supporting a girl because she was saving for college, so I need to visit often and help increase her salary. Supporting hard-working kids is just what decent people do, right? It's like volunteering.
I snorted at Tom's brazenness. So, this is the same apartment complex as Anna, huh? It seems you've been seen getting cozy in the lobby and shopping at the local supermarket. It's become quite the talk among the residents.
As a handsome man and a beautiful woman?
Don't be ridiculous, no. I scoffed at him. It's actually quite the joke. An old man drooling over a girl young enough to be his daughter. It's embarrassing. It's no wonder I'm beyond angry. I'm astonished you'd stoop so low. Tom's eyes widened in anger.
Stop calling it an affair. I genuinely love her.
Gross.
Michelle blurted out, her face contorting in disgust.
Dad, are you serious? Falling for a woman with the same as my age. What's wrong with you?
Be quiet. Let me have my love life at least.
Tom retorted with a defiant look. He continued passionately, despite the frustration evident on both my and Michelle's faces.
She says she wants to marry me after she graduates. Michelle, you will be happier. You're going to have a young and beautiful mom.
Tom's mischievous grin elicited a sigh of exasperation from Michelle.
Dad, wake up. She's just gold digging. A mom only 3 years older? That's just a joke.
I don't care if you approve, Michelle. I'm marrying her anyway.
Don't joke around. If you're going to spend money on some woman, at least increase my allowance. Am I less important than her?
Michelle yelled at Tom, and he coolly replied,
No, Michelle. You're more important. But it seems you could live just fine as long as your liver is healthy.
Michelle glared at me sharply.
That's right. I don't mind if you get divorced, but give me your liver first.
She got off the bed and grabbed my arm with a strength not befitting a sick person, showering me with insults.
The liver can regenerate, right? So don't be stingy. Give it to me. You're my mother. At least be useful for once, you idiot.
Is this why, after all these 5 years, I've tried my best for you and Dad, I'm now subjected to this kind of extortion? I said, disgusted, and Tom smirked.
Scared of the surgery now? Nancy is not only a coward, but a hypocrite. Pathetic.
I've mentioned this before, but if that's the case, you should be the one to take the lead and do it yourself. I snapped back, and Michelle defended Tom.
Dad was incompatible. It can't be helped, right?
Yeah, sorry, Michelle.
Tom apologized deeply, assuming a posture of apology. Exasperated, I pressed the play button on my phone app.
So, I hate pain. And there might be after effects from surgery.
It seems so.
Then I pass. If Michelle isn't in immediate danger, we can wait for another donor.
Hearing the recording, Michelle looked bewildered.
What?
That's how your dad really feels. He never even took the compatibility test. If you doubt it, ask the doctor. Michelle awkwardly turned her head to look at Tom. Tom was sweating profusely, with his mouth opened and closed, but said nothing. In the end, he loves himself more than his daughter.
No, that's not it.
Michelle's eyes quickly filled with tears.
It's awful. I only trusted Dad.
As Michelle's voice trembled, Tom insensitively blurted out even more thoughtless words.
But I like thinner girls. And Michelle, you eat like your mother and keep getting fatter, don't you? It's your own fault that you got sick.
Tom scratched his cheek, showing no signs of a caring father.
Why don't you ask Mom?
Tom said this confidently, clapping his hands together, and Michelle frowned in response.
Dad, have you forgotten? Mom has diabetes and high blood pressure, so it was never possible in the first place.
Right.
Tom realized, having completely forgotten that his ex-wife had these conditions. After a moment of looking at each other, Tom and Michelle suddenly knelt on the floor in front of me, looking determined.
Please, Nancy, give Michelle your liver. I absolutely refuse to do it.
You're our only option. As your daughter, I'm begging you, just say yes. And if you refuse, I'll tell everyone at the hospital that Dad's new partner did something terrible to me.
Enough, I shouted down at them. How many times do I have to say it? I will never register as a donor for you again. I won't be treated like a servant, abused, and then have my liver taken too. That's ridiculous.
Are you still holding that grudge? You're awful.
I was annoyed, so I crouched down, reached under the bed, and grabbed a bag of snack foods. I brushed off Michelle's hand as she tried to take it from me, clutching the snacks as I walked into the hallway. I headed straight for the nurse's station and called out loudly, "Michelle is eating potato chips again." Before I could finish, a nurse rushed over, her face twisted in anger.
Michelle, how many times do we have to tell you? With this behavior, even if a donor appears, a transplant would be impossible.
I'm sorry.
Please, Dad, pay attention. You should act like a father.
As I left the hospital room with a smile, I passed by the downcast figures of Tom and Michelle. Despite being forbidden by the doctor, Michelle had been secretly eating snacks and drinking sodas other than the hospital meals. Her lab values were so poor due to her overeating that her treatment was prolonged and she had to take a break from school. Nurses had suggested Tom at least undergo donor compatibility testing, but he adamantly refused, which enraged Michelle.
He spends money and affection on his mistress, but refuses to help me. I won't rely on Dad anymore.
I hate it. We can just wait until a donor appears, right?
Is that what a parent says? Unbelievable.
The two of them argued daily in the hospital room, completely estranging their relationship. Later, Tom signed and returned the divorce papers I had sent him. I promptly submitted them to the court, and our divorce was finalized. I also received a one-time payment of $10,000 as compensation for his affair with a woman who worked at a bar, which was a relief. However, the real problem was after the divorce. Tom continued to pester me. He knew where I worked, so he would wait for me at the nearest station to my office, begging to reconcile.
Look, I really need you, Nancy. Let's try again. Michelle's medical bills must be costing a lot, right? After paying you the alimony, I've run out of savings.
The reason you're out of savings is because you were supporting your affair. You should ask her for money. I responded coolly.
That's the thing. She dumped me when she found out I was married. Michelle won't even talk to me. I'm so lonely.
You brought this on yourself. If you keep following me, I'll call the police. Finally, after my stern warning, Tom stopped showing up. His affair with a 20-year-old girl while lying about being single became known at his company, and his reputation plummeted. Now he is said to be living a corporate life as if sitting on a bed of nails. Michelle was telling her mother about her hospitalization, and she bragged about her misdeeds up to canceling my donor registration, which led to complaints. Her mother was dismayed by her behavior, coldly replied,
I never thought Michelle couldn't be grateful to others. I'm disappointed. I had thought about living together, but let's forget it. Get along with your father.
Reading this, Michelle burst into tears and lashed out at the nurses. She's now known as the ward's troublemaker. Since I canceled my donor registration, no new donor has appeared. Michelle's condition has continued to worsen, compounded by her previous excessive eating and drinking. She started to follow her dietary therapy in a panic, but it was already too late. Now, she lives under the constant threat of potentially developing liver cancer at any moment, as warned by her doctor. I hear she is living her hospital life in fear, often breaking down in tears. Over these past 5 years, I've really come to understand something. No matter how much you give, some people will never truly perceive your sincerity. Although I've had some tough times, there were also good encounters. I grew close to a colleague who supported me when I was down, and after dating, we got remarried. Instead of a wedding ceremony, we had a house party where Anna and my parents got to know my new partner's sincere and kind personality, and they were visibly relieved. With my wonderful husband, I